Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 88, February 25th, and we are socially distanced. So it's podcasting to a cleaner and healthier world. That's our new byline versus just cleaner world, right?
Yes, because our top mantra now is not just making things look and smell nice, but making it healthy.
Yes, that's right. So let's get started with kind of a somber note. I don't know if those tuning in, it's Thursday. On Tuesday, the president and the vice president, at the end of the day, made a very, well, I don't know how to describe it. They announced the fact that we've hit the 500,000 death mark, which it's even more now, a day later. And that's compared to Brazil is at 246,000, Mexico at 180, India at 156, Italy at 295. But we were talking last week, Mark, about the fact that New Zealand only had 25, and we have 500,000 deaths. It's just mind-boggling. But I want to give a shout out to the president and vice president for really kind of stepping up and talking to people about the fact that they realize the hardship that everybody's going through, and it's very sobering to think about the numbers.
Well, they're also saying that within a month we'll probably be around 600,000.
Yeah.
Although we're on a downturn, which is fantastic. But when this is said and done, you know, it could be in excess of 600,000, and it's almost impossible for that many people to have succumbed to it without it having an impact on all of us. So. There are probably very few people that don't know someone who's been impacted in some way by COVID-19.
Yeah, I'm sure we all do. But so on a positive note,
there's light at the end of the tunnel, Scott.
Yes, that's right. So we have the vaccines coming, and for those in Pennsylvania, you'll know, I don't know if it's just Pennsylvania, but boy, it seems like other states are having a lot better. The people in other states are having a lot better opportunity to get vaccines, because in Pennsylvania, I mean, we're on multiple sites, you know, logging in. It's almost like trying to win the lottery that's going to make you a multimillionaire or something. It's crazy. But so aside from
I had an easier time buying Springsteen tickets in the 70s, you know?
So now some of the worry is once the vaccine supply gets out there, and there's hopefully the new Johnson & Johnson one that's going to get approved, I believe, this Friday, potentially. That's a one-shot vaccine that has less storage issues, that really will ramp up the potential. But now, reading in the news, there's some myths that are still out there about people that don't want to get a vaccine because they think, like the first one here, it isn't safe because it was rushed.
Well, the interesting thing about that comment, in fact, it happened in a miraculously short period of time.
Right.
But to say that it isn't effective because it's rushed is completely discrediting the scientists, the extraordinary amount of talent and knowledge and effort that went into it by people all over the world. And my hat's off to them, knowing that people that were involved with the development of antibiotics and vaccines, everyone to a person, dove into this with their heart and soul, and in a miraculously short period of time developed viable, trustworthy vaccines.
Well, one of the differences that I've read about is that the government kind of bet the house, essentially said, you guys develop this vaccine, we're going to pay for it even if it doesn't work, which normally what they do is they develop the vaccine and then they authorize it being produced. So the vaccines were being produced long before they were actually approved, with the idea that, well, you know, the government would foot the bill if it, for some reason, it didn't work. And the good news is it did work. And so they eliminated that, whatever that time period normally would be involved with there. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, you know, just a final comment on that is that to put any discredit towards the vaccines is discrediting these people that put their heart and soul into it. And these are people, Scott, that I am comfortable saying are much, much smarter than me. and probably much, much smarter than 99% of us.
Yeah.
And to actually just put it down is discrediting some really talented people.
So a couple other myths that are out there. It'll give me COVID-19. That's not true. It'll change my DNA. That's not true. I already had COVID-19, so I don't need it.
Well, that's a good one to address, actually, because I've heard that on a number of occasions. I mean, I haven't heard anybody worried about getting the COVID vaccine and turning into a rabbit. So I'm not worried about it changing somebody's DNA, you know. But I've had people say, well, I've already had it. Do I really need to wear a mask? I've already had it. Do I need to get the vaccine? And the issue is that although you can have it and develop the antibodies, there is no knowledge of how long those antibodies are going to live in your system and actually provide you some form of defense. It may only be several months. In which case you all of a sudden become somebody that would be in a position to contract it again and to spread it again. So just because you might have already have it is no reason not to get the vaccine. Vaccine, by the way, has long-term protection versus the antibodies your body would develop naturally may not be long-term. So that's what we're saying.
So the myths they're out there, but don't believe them. Get the vaccine if you have the opportunity to get the vaccine. We're still waiting here, but I would say go. And that leads us into, we talked maybe a month or two ago about COVID fatigue.
Right.
Well, now there's COVID optimism. Well, isn't that nice?
And it ties into people naming their kids Covey and Quarantina.
Yes. We'll have to do a follow-up on that again 9 months from now. But,
so COVID optimism is a great new term. And actually the schools are reflecting that. The schools are reopening. The CDC has put together some brand new guidelines because everybody wants to get reopened. There's been a reevaluation of whether or not teachers should be considered part of the early phases. And there's a strong argument that they should because that allows us to reopen the schools. By reopening the schools, we're now allowing parents that have been locked in their homes to care for their homeschooled kids to be able to go back to work. So it is actually at the very early stages of guests getting back to what we've always thought of as normal.
So that leads us into a couple new terminologies for what we're... And this is your expert area, so I'm going to let you talk, Mark. Go for it.
So Dr. Fauci was talking about, and Dr. Burke, if you remember her, they were talking about how this COVID-19 might actually become endemic. Now, endemic is a term. It's very different from the word pandemic. Endemic means that it would be something that would be something we would have to fight literally forever, something we would need to fear the threat of forever. Think of things like polio or some of the other things that are things that we have constantly had to worry about. So endemic means it becomes part of the human system, and it may be a forever threat. Now, forever doesn't have to be forever. What happened in the case of polio is we developed vaccines that inoculated our children, and they were basically free of fear of polio their entire lives. The same is true about COVID. Although it may be endemic meaning part of us forever, it doesn't mean that we can't have protection from it, and that way not have to worry about it through our lifetimes and so on. So that's what endemic means versus the term pandemic. And it leads us to another conversation, Scott. You know, I've been involved in a lot of conversations where people want to know if they need to develop a pandemic policy for next year or the year after. And the reality of it is pandemics is a worldwide epidemic, and they happen occasionally in history. The last one was 1918 to 1919. This one came out in 2019, exactly 100 years later, carried through 2020, and we're coming out of the tail end in 2021. Based on that pattern, it could be 50 to 100 years before the world's next pandemic. However, Epidemics are things that occur in a more localized setting, not necessarily jumping from country to country and spanning the entire globe, but epidemics are around all the time. And to give you a good example of epidemics, think of SARS, the original SARS in Hong Kong and Toronto. Think about the swine flu, the bird flu, H5N1, the new H9N7, I think it is, that's just occurred in Russia. So there's been like 5 different types of bird flu, swine flus that have been circulating the globe. Remember the Hong Kong flu? Spanish flu was, of course, 1918. So these are, the epidemics are limited to, let's just say, not spanning the entire globe. So pandemic is an epidemic with a passport.
There you go, for the P.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So an epidemic, what makes an epidemic different from an outbreak? So an outbreak is something that occurs within a facility, inside a school, inside a manufacturing plant. You can have an outbreak of MRSA in a community, which doesn't mean it becomes epidemic where it's affecting multiple communities, or worldwide where it's affecting multiple countries and continents. But an outbreak can occur, and an outbreak can be mitigated. So think about the common flu, which sometimes can shut down a manufacturing plant because there's not enough workers to run an assembly line. So outbreaks are very localized. Epidemics is when it expands beyond just being within a building or a single community. And pandemic is worldwide. And all of these are very different from endemic, which means we may have to live with the threat forever. So how is that for a little lesson?
You know, I think it puts it in perspective. I remember when I was a kid, we used to ride behind the DDT truck. So for mosquitoes, that was. And that was to prevent malaria, by the way. I guess you didn't do that, huh?
That's a disturbing thought. But maybe it would have, created more fertile skin on my scalp.
I gotta say, most of the kids that I grew up with doing it were still around, so I guess it was okay. And our parents let us get up from the dinner table to go like running behind a good humor truck, but except it was putting out pesticides.
Well, the interesting thing, though, the segue on that is that, we do as humankind develop ways to deal with these things, given time, money, effort, brain power. And so that's what creates the Covid optimism. And the thing that I get asked about a lot is, well, how do we know that we've cleaned enough? How do we know if we're in a safe environment? And that takes us into a conversation that we've been having about a trademarked word that we call extreme cleanliness, which is literally an extraordinary level of clean. And extreme cleanliness is something that people would desire to have because it's what creates a comfort zone, being in a building or being in your own home. It's, if it looks dirty, you're not feeling as though it's disinfected. And in fact, the other end of that is also true. You can't disinfect something that's dirty anyway. So anything that you see that looks like it's less than clean, it is very hard to believe that it's been professionally disinfected. So the need for extreme cleanliness has come about, and it's led us down a path to figuring out how do we come up with a metric, a benchmark, or a measurement tool to identify how clean something is. And so there's been a program that the ISSA has offered for years called the Accredited Auditing Professional, which is a way of auditing regular cleaning. And then extreme cleanliness gives us the ability to take that to another level, using some pretty high-tech and sophisticated tools. And we've been playing with some simple tools, things like black lights, and things like
last week's video.
Things like showing how chemistry works. But we also want to share with the folks some pretty sophisticated stuff. And some of this stuff Bullen was responsible to bringing into the cleaning industry years ago.
So I have this little guy right here is a microscope you can plug into your computer, and we'll include some shots from it. So we're not going to do this live right now, but the benefit of this when we first brought it out was, if you look at a piece of carpet and you think, okay, this side's clean, this side's dirty, you think, well, what makes it stay dirty, and it's because of the soiling. Is if you just pour dirt on a clean piece of carpet, you can vacuum it up. It's the residue that's left by other things behind, right, that causes the issues.
Yep.
And the microscope lets you see that effect.
And with the swatch that you're holding, just for the viewers, both sides of that were exposed to the same amount of dirt.
Yep.
Using something called a Snell capsule, which we'll show in future shows.
Yeah.
So it was exposed to equal amount of dirt to both sides.
Yep.
Both were vacuumed. One shows discoloration, one doesn't.
Right.
And so what the scalar scope has the ability to do is to show you that there's dirt deposits on the fiber, on the dirty side.
Yeah, looking at it from this, not a microscopic standpoint, it looks like the whole carpet's dirty, but it really is individual pieces of dirt adhered to the fiber itself.
And the interesting thing is, because it vacuumed out of the other side, the dirt has no adhesive qualities of its own.
Yeah.
The only thing that's holding it there is something that was used on that carpet as a cleaning agent and didn't fully dry out and encapsulate, but actually dried down to a sticky, tacky residue that persists.
Yep.
And that causes villainous resoiling.
So in this case, this side was cleaned with our carpet chemistry, the E-Clean carpet cleaner concentrate, and this side was a competitive material. Both at their standard dilution rates, allowed to dry, then we put them in the Snell capsule, and then that shows you the difference. So the scope allows you to see things that you would not normally perceive with a normal eye, and it kind of gives you a different perspective on why carpets get dirty and why other surfaces get dirty.
You'll see in these photographs were taken at 400 power.
Yep.
So at 400 power, you have the ability to see the fiber and the particulate that's adhering to whatever residue is on that fiber, not because the dirt itself is sticky. So that's an interesting thing, and check this out.
This is an example of a clean fiber under the scope. And this is an example of a fiber with villainous soil or sticky residue that's going to make the dirt adhere to the fiber. So, in finishing up, today you've got some news coming up. I think you're going to be made famous on a couple broadcast type things.
Well, I guess the phrase is, everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame.
Yes.
However, I've been invited to participate with Jeff Cross's Straight Talk program. It's a podcast program that Jeff Cross does on behalf of the ISSA. ISSA's reach is worldwide.
Yeah.
Jeff does a phenomenal job with the Straight Talk. He interviews people all the time. Very fascinating, smart, and interesting people. I guess he didn't have anybody for this week, so he asked me to. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to actually have the opportunity to talk about extreme cleanliness and what we're looking towards for the future. So that'll be fun.
Maybe we can add a link to that when it's posted up below this video.
Yep, that'll be good.
Okay, so one of the things we've been remiss in bringing up, even though it was on the schedule of things to talk about, is sprayers. And so this is not brand new news, but there's some news out there about 400,000 batteries that are having some issues. And we just want to remind people that we have sprayers that don't have batteries, and we have them in stock. So we have this unit, which is called the S&G Mini, and then we have a larger rolling one. Eliminates all those problems and also is much more economical from a purchasing standpoint versus the other sprayers, if we want to call them that.
Yep. Well, there's people that have been a little distressed about not having access to their battery-powered equipment. And so we want to be able to let people know that there's other options and other solutions, and we can provide them.
Yep. So in closing, we want to talk about getting the word out. So I did it last week, you do it this week.
So if you like today's program, you can help us out a lot by telling 2 friends about it.
Yep.
Send them this email, or you can have them click on the link down below when they receive it and add their names to the mailing list.
Yep.
And that gives us a broader base and maybe gives us a louder volume to our voice.
Not 1, but 2, because there's a lot.
Got to have a geometrical progression.
That's right, just like bacteria, viruses, and everything else.
Absolutely.
In closing, let's put our masks on and say goodbye to the crowd, and we can get back to work, right?
Yep. Well, thanks everybody for tapping in, and if you'd if you liked it and enjoyed it, please pass it along to 2 others so that they can click on the button below and like it and subscribe to it and never miss a future update.
That's right. Do like the kids do.
Thanks, everybody.